Ready? Okay. I hope everyone enjoyed their break and has more questions to put to our panel. We are going to now go on with the evening, and we've got a new addition to the platform. That is Phil Neal, who's a young trade unionist in the public sector. And we're also going to be joined by Jane Godley, the actress, comedian and playwright, who will be joining the platform in the next 10 or 15 minutes. So we are going to follow the same format as last time, but this time it would be good if there were some more questions that come from the audience. And if someone could just get a spare seat up here, please. So yeah, more questions. And also just to say, if you don't have a question, but maybe you've got the answer to a question or you'd like to make a general comment, that's absolutely fine as well. So please do engage and with the night as it goes on. So I'm going to start this section, which is going to discuss general issues around are we too poor, and also are we too stupid, as the title of the event is called. And this is the first question that we've had in, which is related to an issue which is a massive issue in the referendum, which we haven't really touched on so far, which is the issue of Trident. And obviously that links in to the question of how we might fund extra public services and so on. So I'm going to start now with Michael to give his views on the question of Trident and what we might do about it if we win independence.
Okay, ladies and gentlemen, I hope you all enjoyed your brilliant break. One of the sad and sorry slurs and accusations that's often levied at the referendum discussion is, oh, it's awfully parochial, that horrible slurring word, saying, oh, you're just thinking about yourself and all that. Because, we're wanting to scrap Trident and, move it wherever you want. Well, one of the reasons that I became engaged in this debate and really cared about it was after reading John Ainsley's papers as part of the Scottish CND, especially the one called Trident, Nowhere to Go. And that's important because it sets out a lot of the detail about one of the most significant things that could happen as a result of an independent Scotland. And that's that Britain, an imperialist country by its origins and behaviour, one of the first nuclear countries in the world, could become a non-nuclear country and would completely remove nuclear weapons from its soil. And that, for me, is far greater an opportunity than anything to do with your own identity about being Scottish, perhaps even far greater than the £150 million Scottish taxpayers would save every year, because it would be one of the greatest victories for the peace movement and for everyone who cares about peace, solidarity and justice that this country has achieved within a generation. And, just so I don't get tired and boring and make this dull, because this should really be a fun debate, I think. How beautiful would it be to see that Trident submarine sailing back into Faslane for the last time and watching those nuclear weapons drive to Coolport to be decommissioned? How brilliant would that be? And the gentleman shouts out when, which actually links me perfectly into John Ainsley's second report, which is decommissioning Trident, how long it would take. And actually, if you speak to Fergal Dalton, who's a councillor in the West End of Glasgow, he'll tell you, because he was a commander on one of the Trident submarines, that you could get it back in overnight, and within, according to John Ainsley's figures, you could decommission it completely within 2 to 2.5 years. So like our questions earlier, that's not inevitable. That's not set in stone. It will be down to people in Scotland to put great pressure on those who make those decisions to make that happen. But what potential and what an opportunity for peace in the world.
Sorry, can you say that again, sir?
Yes, sir.
So the panel can you? Okay. Okay, thank you. Mary? Okay, Mary?
There's more to it than just the west of Scotland as well, because there are still hulks sitting at Rosyth on the Forth, and there are still issues with where nuclear waste has been disposed of throughout Scotland. So you're right, it is a bigger issue. But it's not that it's a bigger issue, it's a more dispersed issue. I mean, I'm quite concerned at the recent SNP conference that decided it was going to keep Scotland a member of NATO. Because NATO is a first strike nuclear alliance. And while I will celebrate, and nobody more, the removal of a nuclear arsenal from the whole of Britain, which Scotland would lead the way in doing by getting rid of Trident and not permitting whatever replaces it from being stationed here, nevertheless, we would still be, under those circumstances, supporting a nuclear alliance. I have a personal interest in this. I don't know if anybody else here has ever been to jail, but I have. And it is therefore a major factor in my decision that I wanted to vote yes, that we are going to get rid of this piece of evil. Way back in the 1980s, I went on a demonstration outside Fastlane and I was lifted. The police explained to me that their system was that they arrested 1 in 10. They looked at the crowd and they just said 1, 2, 3. It was decimation. And I was one of those who was decimated and singled out. And I have to tell you that I've been very wary about going back on the demonstrations since, because 10 days in Cornton Vale was no joke at all. But we have to get rid of it. We absolutely have to get rid of it. I'm a multilateralist. Fundamentally, I think these weapons are evil. I think that anything that affects the environment for we don't know how long after, that does not degrade, that kills people who are civilians as well as people who are fighting, is in itself intrinsically a mass evil. And we do have to get rid of it. And we have to get rid of it throughout the world. And if Scotland did it first of all, by Jove, it would be showing the way. And I think it's a great thing. But there is an after thing. And I'm not sure that using disused nuclear naval bases then, just to allow the rest of Britain's global reach, imperial power, to use us as a carrier base is the right thing to do. Because I think we should be more adventurous and more imaginative, and we should seek to turn the swords into ploughshares and use bases like Fastlane for civilian development in things like the renewables that Pete was going on about earlier on.
Okay, just before I bring the other panellists in, there was a hand raised here. Is it about this particular issue?
It is indeed.
Okay.
There's two things we've got to take into account. Someone asked when we'll try and when is it going to go? And there's two things you have to consider. The experience of Iceland in relation to NATO at the time of the banking crisis, and that'll take 1 minute, I'll come to that, and the attitude of the Americans to Trident. Scotland becomes independent, and Trident's in the Clyde, and the Scottish Government is going to get rid of it. So let's just indulge the No campaign, and they decide to keep Trident, rot. Okay, that's the attitude of the No campaign. The Scottish Government would then have no option but to turn to the Russians or the Chinese to get rid of it. That aspect has never entered the public discourse. The militaries all over the world, security people, they know that. They understand that. And there's an example from Iceland that I'll come to in a second to explain that. The United States simply will not tolerate having officers of the strategic rocket forces of the Soviet Union, or the Russia as they call it now, or the Chinese Navy crawling over Northern Europe. They simply won't tolerate it because of having these people there to decommission. The Americans simply won't tolerate it, so Britain will be instructed to decommission for that reason. Then comes to the point is the SNP government brave enough to ask that question Well, you've got to look at what Iceland did during the banking crisis. The leader of the No campaign, the Chancellor of the time, was going to use anti-terrorism legislation to go for the Icelandic banks. The then Prime Minister of Iceland went on Newsnight and actually said, if you're going to go for our banks, by the way, you should know that the Russians at the moment are wanting to set up in a disused NATO airfield a Russian base. This was said in Newsnight. In other words, a NATO member actually played brinksmanship in that part. So the Americans simply will not tolerate the idea of the Russian specialists or the Chinese specialists coming to decommission. They will demand that it's done by NATO countries. But you won't get that in a discourse.
Okay, thanks very much. Phil?
Yeah, I think a lot of the audience are right that actually Faslane's the sort of start of a lot of what we're talking about, and I think more importantly the physical sort of bases are only half the story when we consider the influence of the British state on the rest of the world that stretches back to colonies in India, to obviously a half-hour flight over into Ireland. I think it becomes a question of actually what type of foreign policy do we want in independent Scotland. Faslane and getting rid of nuclear weapons has to be the sort of first thing we actually do, and the sooner that can be done, the better. I think we have to look also that this really differentiates from asking for more powers, because I think it's something, just to come back a slight bit, in that the Red Paper Collective kind of get a bit wrong, in that if you're going to ask for a federalist kind of UK model, you still retain the heart of what makes Britain a horrible, nasty country abroad, and that is obviously the British state and its army and its military apparatus and nuclear weapons. I would personally be in favour of a more of an anti-imperialist sort of foreign policy. I think that's perfectly achievable. We might not talk about socialism being achievable in one country, but certainly if we look at the achievements across Latin America and the foreign policy stance that has been adopted there through ALBA, which has sort of replaced the American kind of alliance over there, we can sort of begin to see that actually we can be part of a more progressive foreign policy in the world that favours negotiations and diplomacy and gets rid of nuclear weapons and their sort of military machismo, so to speak.
Okay, and Shona?
Well, kind of annoyingly, what everybody has just said, I absolutely agree with. I don't think Trident is something in nuclear and foreign policy, and for those who know me, NATO is very, very close to my heart, and that I hate them all. To be absolutely honest, this is non-negotiable. I mean, there can't be any question about Trident. It has to go. Nuclear weapons have to go. I want, without absolute question, multilateral disarmament. I want them all gone. We cannot use them. As soon as one person uses them, it's the end of the world. I think that the one thing that I want to see, which using Scottish independence, is the fact that we can then make that step to be the grown-ups, to go, do you know what? This is a bad toy. This is a bad, bad toy. And we can be the grown-ups and say, come on, let's us start this. Let's get rid of them now. You're saying about the Faslane, about the Faslane's just a start. Yeah, and when we're talking about Faslane, we're kind of just talking about the nuclear weapons in the country. And yeah, John Ainsley's report makes it very clear that the first thing we need to do is get rid of the warheads. Everything else we can talk about, everything else takes time. Let's get rid of these warheads now.
Okay, and thanks very much. We're going to go into another question now, and I'm going to jump back.
From the point of view of the Americans would actually prefer that UK get rid of Trident, right? Because as a percentage of the total strike capability, it's minuscule, right? If we took out our missiles, right, it would make a very, very small dent in the total number of nuclear warheads there are in the world, right? But it's a very, very big dent in the UK defence budget. The Americans, from their point of view, would far prefer that Britain didn't spend money on nuclear weapons and instead had more conventional weapons. So this is a case where It might not be for the right reasons, but our objectives coincide. The Yanks actually want them to get rid of Trident as well, because that gives them more money to spend on boots on the ground in whatever country we're going to invade next.
Okay, there's a number of hands that have been raised. Just before I bring in the next series of questions, Mary's desperate to come back in on this particular point, and then I'll take yourself.
I think there is a massive nuclear proliferation at the moment in Europe, which is led by the Americans. If you look at the bases and the intercontinental ballistic missiles that are being stationed in Turkey, in Poland, and in several other of the countries of Eastern Europe, that is again putting a nuclear curtain as distinct from an iron curtain between us and the Soviet Union. Now, these are supposed to be being targeted against Iran, Iraq, and Korea, North Korea. Sorry, I'm getting confused with my Koreans here. But the Americans are going to want bases all over the place. The Russians, because people were talking about decommissioning, the Russians have offered to do it as a joint project because they wanted a guarantee from the Russia-NATO Council that the weapons would not be capable of being targeted at Russian cities. That undertaking was denied. So when the Americans want to take control of the whole of the nuclear umbrella, that is a factor in it. And that is really, really big international politics, which an independent Scotland will have to grapple with.
Okay, thanks very much. Okay, I'm going to take another round of questions, starting with yourself up at the back.
Thanks a lot, Chair. I'm a member of a trade union that's organised on an all-Britain basis, Unison. So at some point in an independent Scotland, there will have to be a discussion about how the relationship works, because the argument will be that it'll loosen the ability of workers across the whole of Britain to fight back against capital. That will be an argument. So there needs to be a relationship created about how do we link in with workers. Just the point I wanted to make will end up straying into another place here, but so many of the ideas that have been discussed tonight aren't supported by the main parties. What's being discussed tonight is well to the left of either the SNP, the Liberals, the Tories, and the Labour Party. But in a general election situation in 2016, if there's a yes vote, who should we vote for? Because none of the parties support coming out of NATO. All of the parties support cuts in services and the role of big business. So who is it to vote for in 2016? Now, my point is this. See now, this is the time we have to start having an argument and a discussion and a debate about some of these ideas. Otherwise, we'll end up with nobody to vote for, because all the main parties will support cuts and support NATO and support big business. That's the point. My question is, what are we going to do? Who should we vote for in 2016 in an independent Scotland?
Thanks very much. I'm just going to take one more question and I'll bring those two to the panel. So yourself? Yeah.
My question's about education. Obviously, in the wider Yes campaign, we're aligned somewhat with the SNP wanting the Yes vote, but the SNP have just brought in an education system that, for the first time in about 20 years in Scotland, creates a two-tiered education system where you have one group of students sit in a qualification that sends them straight to university, and another group of students sit in a qualification that's an absolute joke. They don't sit an exam, they sit an internal qualification that really isn't going to get them anywhere. And it's creating a two-tiered society of the educated and the uneducated. The educated going on to the high-paid jobs, the uneducated going on to the low-paid jobs to enable, I assume, Mike Russell to put forward his ideals from his from his book, where he talks about challenging China and other such countries for low-paid workers and such. So my question is basically, what do the panel think about the education system that's currently operating in Scotland, and also what would your kind of opinion be about where we should go after independence in a kind of more left-leaning progressive Scotland?
Okay, thanks very much. I'm going to start with Phil in particular on the question of the trade unions that was asked. So if you want to make some comments on that, what will happen if we win independence to the trade union movement?
Yeah, it's worth obviously, I think some of you will know in the room, what organisation I work for, and obviously any views I express are myself personally, my own personal views, and do not represent those of the wider trade union movement or indeed the trade union I work for. In terms, I think the trade union movement, really, the independence debate is a challenge to them. It's, do we want to move forward as a labour movement, both within Britain, internationally, but also within Scotland, or do we want to retain and stay the same and sort of continue pouring money into the black hole of the Labour Party? I think, personally, the way to go is really to see the trade unions to see it as an opportunity to sort of reinvent themselves, to reconnect with civil society, but also as a way of breaking free from a lot of the constraints that have been imposed from the anti-trade union laws is just one mere example. But also under an independent Scotland, we could look at laws that would actually empower trade unions against the private sector, for example, would give trade unions a greater say in society, and also look at the ways in which workers and the worker democracy can operate, and the trade unions provide a useful framework for that. I think a lot of the critique that comes to the trade unions and a lot of the worries are quite easily addressed by the fact that a lot of trade unions operate in Scotland with the Scottish Parliament already, and international solidarity and stuff is quite easily achieved amongst sort of across borders. And actually, I think it would inspire workers in England as opposed to sort of limit them in somewhat. In terms of, I think this goes hand in hand again with the sort of question of education. I think we either look at an education system like Mike Russell does and work in colleges, work with people in colleges, and they're undergoing a lot of mergers, all again from the brainchild of Mike Russell. And do we want an education system based on market reform, on training people for the workplace and the workplace only, or do we want an education system based on big ideas, based on skilling people up for the general, into sort of like ideas like the green economy and stuff? Or do we want people just to be bred for profit? I mean, I think we absolutely have to say that the education system should be geared towards the new ideas and new ways to sort of shape society, but also geared towards making it a fair and just place to work, but also empowering students and young people to actually think again with their brains.
Thanks very much. Just before I direct these questions to the rest of the panel, just to introduce Jane Godley, the actress and comedian. So, round of applause, please, for our panellists. Jane.
Hi there.
Jeannie.
Is it a democracy with the microphones? Just checking. Am I just taking your microphone?
It's Sherry.
Is that what we're calling it? That's cool. Hello, everybody. I missed the beginning of the debate because I wasn't sure of the timings. And I bathed my two nieces and blew dry their hair, which was a treat. And I met their new kitten who clawed me. So a bit like Scottish politics all round. Does anybody have any questions for a comedian who doesn't know a lot but is quite argumentative about politics?
Well, the person at the back asked, who the hell are we going to vote for if we get independence?
Oh, okay. Yeah. Well, for me, I'm just back from Manchester this morning. I was doing a gig in Manchester last night. I was absolutely tempted to ditch the gig and just find David Cameron and punch him in the face. I know that's no normal, but don't advocate violence, but seriously, that would have made a brilliant YouTube. Who should we vote? I think we should vote for somebody who stops blaming past governments for everything, because the recent debate I had was something like £79 million was spent on a train link from Glasgow airport to the city centre, which they abandoned after spending £79 million on. And we all know that a lot of that money was just buying up property. And you're not telling me for 1 minute, I'm a bird for the East End of Glasgow, there was corruption there of some sorts. You're not telling me that every single, a strip of land for Paisley to Glasgow is worth £79 million. If that was the truth, Donald Trump would have built a golf course on it. So when I brought that up, Christine McKelvey, who's SNP, she came back immediately and told me, oh, well, see, that wasn't us, that was Labour. And then Labour said, well, see, that wasn't us. And I'm absolutely heartsick of every government blaming, I don't know what's been spoken about before, so if I'm covering new ground, live with it. So I'm sick of every single government saying, well, it wasn't me, it was my ex-boyfriend that ran up the electricity bill. I'm sick of that analogy. If I worked in a job as a secretary and 3 years down the line, I was so shit at my job, and I went, well, it's no my fault, the last secretary left an awful mess, I'd be sacked. But no, that doesn't happen. So who should we vote? I think we're stuck in the conundrum that, A, we're never going to get another Tory in Scotland. No, if we collectively have a brain. That cannot happen. If it does, I'm going to live in the moon. And that's the exact... That's exactly... I'd just start fucking smashing tumblers, do you know what I mean? Like the Tories are in, I'm fucking done, right? That's what would happen. It was beautiful comic timing, as we call it in the business. I don't think, surely we all agree that the Tories can't get back in. They just can't. If they can, I think we're completely doomed. In fact, I still wake up every morning and go, why are we still under a Tory government? How did that happen? Did I have a coma and wake up and go, what happened? Because that's how it feels. I'm not sure if SNP are going to be the right people because I haven't investigated. Every time I talk about something, I get an excuse. And Labour, I can't forgive for dragging us into an illegal war. And I did actually call Tony Blair the C word. I'm not going to say it here because I know it offends some people. I don't know why. If 1 in 5 children is what? Yeah. Yeah. It is another C word, but it's not the one I called Tony Blair to his face. So, I don't want, I can't forgive them. I think that we should try and get independence, and I'm not sure if I'm completely swayed for it. I'm still frightened. I think that I speak for a lot of people when I say I'm not entirely sure what's happening, but I know what I don't want. That's about as much as I can answer that.
Okay, thanks very much. Mary, one of the questions that was put there was, well, let's take the issue of NATO. All of the mainstream parties are in favour of being part of NATO. So how are we going to deal with that when it comes to getting us out?
I think it actually ties in to the other question about who we're all going to vote for. And it's a sort of, I'm in the Labour Party. I sometimes wonder why the hell I'm in the Labour Party, but I am in the Labour Party, and I defend the Labour Party for the bits that I can defend it on, and not for the indefensible, which includes, in fact, which is predominantly taking us into that abominable war. But it seems to me that the leaderships of all the political parties and the people that are supposed to be representing us in the parliaments, all the parliaments and in the councils, are not like us. They don't agree with us. In 1997, when the first New Labour government, and I use the word New Labour because it was nothing to do with me, became the government, and everybody was saying things can only get better. That year, before it was elected, the Scottish Labour Party at conference voted to end Trident, to get rid of Trident. It voted to have a government, a Labour government, that was opposed to nuclear weapons. 3 months later, Labour was elected, and the first thing that was announced, almost, was a strategic defence review from which getting rid of Trident would be excluded specifically. And the Labour Party committed to Trident. I've never met, well, I have actually, but they're all MPs or MSPs, another Labour Party member who isn't frightened that they would lose their job if we got rid of Trident, who supports it. The Labour Party does support membership of NATO. So does the Scottish National Party, so do the Liberal. You know, they all support NATO. I bet if you actually had a vote of the people who are members of the parties, or the people that they represent, they wouldn't support any of these things. So the real question is not which party do we vote for or who do we vote for. The question is, how do we make sure that whichever parties exist belong to us, the people? If we believe that the people of Scotland are sovereign, it doesn't just mean that we are sovereign over the state. It means that we are sovereign over our representatives, that they don't see their principal job as passing laws and making the policies that they want to see, but they see their job as being representing us, the people. And I don't know whether we can do that with the existing parties. But having a new country makes that a question up for discussion. You know, the parties at the moment are actually selecting the people who will stand for election in 2016, whether or not we have an independent Scotland. How damn well dare they? We might not want any of them. We might not want any of them. We might want something different.
But that's the point, is every time I speak to somebody, it's just when I speak to people, everybody I've met, none of them agree with anything that Labour have done or said they would do. None of them truly agree with SNP. None of them are Tories, because I wouldn't speak to them. But it's like nobody has a complete and clear direction. And I speak about politics on Facebook, and I like a healthy debate, as folk know. There's nothing better than a right good argument, and at my age it's entertainment. But people come back and they don't know. And I think this is one of the biggest problems about the independence debate, is not every... I mean, people here obviously know. There's a lot of people here who are very educated in what they know. But see the two children whose hair I washed, and my niece and her husband, I spoke to them. They don't know. They don't even know what it means. And that's one of the biggest problems, is ordinary people don't know. We're okay because we research it and it's our hobby, it's our thing, it's our life, it's our motivation. But Alec and Alice and Bill and Frank and Jeannie, they don't know. And I think I think that Scotland is going to vote independence not because they know, because every time the English press say we don't want Scotland, Scotland's got a brilliant attitude. It's called the fuck you attitude. And they just go, I will fuck you. And they'll just vote it. And they'll not clearly think about it, because we're like that as a nation. They're like, you're shit at that, well, fuck you, and then do it. That's who we are collectively as a people, and I like that about us. But we tend to have a kind of not think we were heart, not think we were brain, we think we were like, fuck you, well, get up, we're just going to be Scottish then. And then no think it through. And I want people to have a clearer mandate about what it is that's happening. Some people don't even know that you can vote for independence and it doesn't have to be SNP. When I say that to people, they go, how does that work? I'm like, how can you not know this? But people don't know. So I think that's something that should be spoken about as well.
Shona?
Okay, I hate coming in after the funny people. Okay. Anyway, so I'm going to hit the three kind of wee points that came up. Firstly, I'm in terms of trade unionists, I'm an absolute internationalist without question, and I care equally about the trade unionists, the workers in Spain, in Kenya, as I do about the workers in Sheffield and Glasgow. Okay, so I would like to see Scotland maybe even becoming leaders. I don't know, setting a positive standard for across the world to look, do you know what, this is what we could do, this is what you could do. In terms of political parties, you're right, a lot of the parties do seem to have very similar policies on a number of things, or they don't necessarily fit in with what a lot of people's actual views are. What I'm going to say to that then is, start your own, right? I mean, I hear people saying, I can't get involved in politics, blah, blah, blah. Do you know what? Start your own. If you don't like what the parties are doing, create a new party. Let's change after independence. Let's form a whole new political spectrum across Scotland. Let's get more women involved. Let's just make it better. We've got that option. We can do that. And the last thing, which is probably a negative thing to end on, because I'm going to get heckled, I'm a school teacher.
Yay!
Sorry.
Heckle!
I'm not wait till the heckling bit comes in.
Right.
I absolutely, without question, love the curriculum for excellence. Okay, that's where I'm going to get kicked on my way out. I love the concept of the curriculum for excellence. The whole idea is to help kind of actually equalise the education system. We've become absolutely obsessed with exams and about how good your school's doing. I've worked in lots of schools that are described as the poor schools in Glasgow. I've worked in the better off schools in Glasgow, and some of the best teaching, some of the best things you see is actually what the curriculum, even before the curriculum of excellence was talked about, is what's actually been happening in schools in poorer areas. I mean, we work cross-curricular, the teachers work together, the schools stop being focused absolutely on exams. And exams are when you become all about exams, you stop teaching. I mean, see, one of the schools I taught in gets amazing grades, gets really, really, really positive reviews about how good it is. Do you know what? I never taught one of those kids, and it disgusted me. I was told that I had to give them prelim exams and walk them through what the answers are going to be. I didn't teach them a single thing about computing, because that's what happened to the education system. I want to teach kids. I want to educate them. I want to talk to them about things. Things like citizenship and joining it, cross-curricular. That's what the Curriculum for Excellence is about. The issue is that teachers have become quite entrenched, and I kind of, in fact, I'll stop there talking about teachers. Both in the schools it failed, both at the government level it failed. The concept of the Curriculum for Excellence is superb, and it would have helped me because I failed all the way through school. I came from an academic family, and that is the only reason why I got anywhere. I had to resit university, and I had the family who could afford to pay for me to resit university. I failed because I was not designed to do an exam-based system, but I made it through because I'm lucky enough to have made it through. I think the Curriculum for Excellence is excellent, but it needs support from everybody. And I just, yeah.
Can I just say one thing very quickly? I forgot there was a child here and I swore. I'm really sorry. Never use that language until you're 18. At Disney Mart, he's not heard it from me. Here's a tip, wee man. Yeah. It's no bad words, they're adult words. As soon as you're 18, you can use them and in context.
I'm just going to bring Michael in now to have...
Okay, and why not just have a little bit more audience participation? Put your hand up if you want to see a more equal Scotland. That's quite good, okay, you can put your hand in. Put your hand up if you want to see Scotland play a more peaceful role in the world, maybe prioritising, conflict resolution over war. Right, that's quite good. Cool, I think those two is a pretty good consensus. And the person at the back, the member from Unison, was asking quite a simple question: how do we get it? Especially when maybe a lot of people here don't necessarily trust any of the parties. Mm-hmm. And that's a really difficult question, but I'll give two little bits of hope and optimism, because I love doing that. And here they are. The first is, sometimes maybe we're a bit overly cynical and harsh on Scottish Labour. Particularly Scottish Labour, because as the party that's linked to the trade union movement, they're not always bad. Like, you can look at a few examples of this in terms of them, campaigning harder than other mainstream parties against blacklisting, being one of the main central parties to raise concerns about the attacks on trade union tribunals recently by the Tories. Had another example, the Scottish Labour Party actually supported the N30 strikes when Miliband didn't. So why am I saying that? Because the Scottish Labour Party is actually quite different, some would say slightly to the left, of the party in London. So strategy number one...
Just let him finish.
It means that there's pressure being put on the SNP to do something about it. So when the SNP didn't do anything about the recent attacks on trade union tribunals by the Tories, Drew Scott raised it in Parliament. When Neil Findlay raises stuff about trade union rights, it's getting heard. And if Neil Findlay or one of these people was a minister in independent Scotland, I think that would be better than it being decided by Chris Grayling or any of the Tory ministers. So I think that's strategy number one. But the more interesting strategy is number two. If there's a democratic movement right now with a lot of new grassroots organisations, there will be new parties. There'll be new ideas in Scotland and there'll be new opportunities. And we won't be waiting or looking for these politicians that we've already given up hope on to tell us what a future Scottish government will do. Hopefully, that'll be our decision.
Okay, there's now a few hands that went up. I know you're dying to come back, which I'm going to let you do now on the Curriculum for Excellence. And then that debate can be continued over a drink after the meeting. So I'll let you come back for a couple of minutes. Then I've got three more speakers. I'm going to bring in a series of questions.
Yeah, it's just quickly. Obviously, every teacher I know agrees with the fundamental ideology behind Curriculum for Excellence. But when you underfund an education system like that, to the extent that the SNP and in Glasgow the Labour Council have, you end up with a two-tier education system, which is what we have. I am sitting in a school in the Southside of Glasgow teaching a National 4 class of children who, under standard grade, could have gone on next year and done Intermediate 2 and then higher in 6th year, but who are sitting doing National 4 this year. They will not achieve National 5 next year because the jump is too big. It's too big for them. They will leave school with National 4, which if you go to any employer and say, I've got this qualification that I didn't even sit an exam to get, they're going to laugh in your face and take the kid that's got National 5. So yes, the ideology is excellent, but you've got to put the money in it in order to get the practice right.
Okay, thanks very much. Now, yourself, I've got a few hands up. I'll come to everyone. Don't worry, yourself.
Yeah, I just wanted to make a point. It's not me.
Sorry, just the mic comes there.
So yeah, I just wanted to make a point. It's not a question. To sort of encourage everybody when we're talking about what parties are we going to vote for. It seems very clear to me from these debates that no longer can we rely on our political parties to just make our decisions for us. We have to, at this point, recognise that we've got the power, and if we've got a good idea, then we have to communicate it and find the ways to lobby our politicians and communicate with them. And I think too often as well, we frown upon this idea of taking action with your heart. For me, taking action with your heart is actually a very valuable thing, and it's not about Braveheart and all that rubbish. When the Iraq War happened, I was quite young and I didn't understand what it was about, and I didn't understand the politics, but I did understand that I didn't want my fellow brothers and sisters, regardless of what country they came from, to be killed. And so I took action based on that, and that was my heart speaking. So I think actually we have to rely on our hearts, and when our hearts speak to us about humanitarian issues and about how we want our brothers and sisters and ourselves to be looked after, then we do need to take our political action from our hearts.
Yeah.
Just put your hands up again so I get everyone. Okay, I've got yourself, and then you. Okay, yeah, in the stripey.
Yes. I just wanted to. I was so glad when you walked in there, Jerry, because you just articulated exactly. I have spent the past 4 years, every day of my life, tearing my hair out, trying to convince people why independence is good, and I got caught up in all the intrinsic, say, economies and passports and all that stuff. And I've got to the conclusion that I've realised that people aren't diametrically opposed to independence. It's not the idea of Scotland being an independent country that they're opposed to. It's that they don't believe that anything can be better than the way it is now. People have lost all hope, and if you want an example of that being a reality, half the country doesn't vote. And nobody seems concerned about that. I watched that by-election in Aberdeen, and they all sat around their table, oh, well, for a by-election it wasn't bad, and I thought, wait, and what democracy is 30% of the population of an area turning out to vote acceptable? And our problem is that we're not waking people up, we're not inspiring people, and that's where, take all the stuff out of this debate, all these wee tiny pieces, and talk about the philosophy, talk about the reality of taking control of your government and having a government you can vote for, and it will be accountable. And we've never had that in 300 years, so I can understand why people wouldn't get it. But this is an opportunity to have a government that we can hold to account, so we don't have to put up with the disgrace that goes on with the Scottish politics, because it's absolutely outrageous, and no wonder people aren't involved, but we have to do something about voting. Half the country don't vote.
Excellent. I've got 2 more speakers, and then I'm going to bring the panel back in, so just yourself, sitting directly behind the last speaker, and then over to the right.
Well, I thought it was an interesting question about the red paper, which came up before. I haven't read the red paper, I don't know what it is. I'm not sure I'm going to read it. And also the audience member at the back who spoke about the importance of discussing, I think what he meant was we need to discuss the power of international capital in relation to an independent Scotland. And I think that is a really good point. However, I've spoken to quite a lot of no voters who are friends of mine, who are middle class, who are probably kind of Labour Party supporters or whatever, and their main argument is always, well, no, we need to stick together in the UK because we will constitute a stronger force against international, to counterbalance international capital. However, I think unless Scotland, and I mean with the 50% voters or whatever it is, that is really bad. But unless you suggest that independent Scotland will be far more democratically flawed, then I fail to see how it will be a worse counterbalance, even as a small country, towards international capital. And also there are many countries, I think, that are far smaller than the UK are, that this minute are more effective counterbalance nationally towards international capital than the UK is at the moment.
Thanks very much. Yourself, if you just wait till the mic comes over, and then I've got just at the back as well, and then after that I'm going to bring the panellists in, and you can think of another round of questions.
If we made the voting like X Factor, it would work.
Where am I going?
Okay,
it's a question for the panel, and it's really a question for all of us. I've been at fantastic bedroom tax meetings all over Glasgow, View Park. There was a meeting in View Park a few weeks ago, 150 people packed in a room like this, and real anger about what the bedroom tax is doing to communities. But always on these meetings there's politicians, there's the Labour and the SNP, and folk aren't convinced what either of them are saying about the bedroom tax. I would reckon that most of the folk there are fairly neutral about the whole question of independence. And I suppose the question, I was through in Edinburgh 2 weeks ago, and I was in Manchester on Saturday. It seemed to me the people out demonstrating were the same people. They want a better world, they want something better than this, what we've got right now. And I suppose the question for the panel, the question for ourselves is, how do we connect that idea of independence with those struggles right now, the real struggles, the bedroom tax? And I think if we can do that, because that's where the undecideds are, that's where the people looking at the politicians got nothing to offer us, and we've really got to get in there into the fights now and convince folk that the idea of independence is something that's real, but is also, it will make real changes. It will be the end of the bedroom tax, it will be the end of post-office privatisation, and so on.
Thanks very much. And the next speaker is just behind there.
Hiya. Actually, it's kind of tied into the point that the gentleman just made. I've been to.
Sorry, can you speak up?
Sorry.
I don't think that microphone's
Okay.
working.
Okay. I'll just talk
Belt it out.
loudly. Okay. It's related to kind of the point that the gentleman was making there. I'm part of Women for Independence as well, and I've been to about 20 local meetings for the Yes campaign. And what is really encouraging is that we're kind of trying to imagine what independence will look like, whether you're coming from a far left perspective, centre left. I don't ever really hear a centre right perspective or a kind of centrist perspective. It's all about imagining a different Scotland using different powers. My problem is that the No campaign are not having the same discussion because it doesn't suit them to open themselves up to debate. But we have a lot of debate about how we imagine Scotland. My problem is that we risk spending so much time talking about it that not everybody is out talking to other people with different opinions and talking and convincing them, because we're not going to win independence if we're not talking to people where people are. And I think that the gentleman brought up a really good point about people are worried about the bedroom tax. We don't want people to vote independence because they're scared about what's happening just now, but we do want them to imagine something different where we can take the opportunity to make choice. So actually we have a responsibility not just to sit around and imagine, but to be talking to people where people are and considering where they're coming from, what their perspectives are. And so just if we take something away from tonight, it should be that, you know, there's no voters in the room. That's great, because we're here discussing what we imagine. But talking to other people where they are is how we're going to win a yes vote. And the only way we can implement all the stuff that we want to, that we're talking about right now, is if we win a yes vote. We have to do that first.
Thanks very much. Right, there is a few more people with hands up. You will get to speak, but I do want to just let the panelists just come back on some of that so that all the questions are answered. So, Jenny, I mean, how do you think we're going to connect with people over this debate?
I come from a incredibly poor working class family who weren't interested in politics, they were just interested in surviving. So I wasn't brought up to be political or have interest in it, so I'm trying to think it from that perspective. How do we get people who are basically feeling a hopelessness and get them involved? I wished I had the answer, because I came up with a really good premise, but it's like a good joke, but I've not got a punchline. And the problem is not enough people, like that lady said, she made a really good point, they aren't talking about it. All we see on TV, and this is how people get their information, it's they watch the X Factor, they watch the telly, they watch Big Brother, they watch Made in Chelsea. People watch the telly. So what they see on TV, as far as I'm concerned, is a war that we're still paying for, that we're never going to win. Can we just back out of that fight now, please? They're seeing people being traumatised with the bedroom tax and ATOS, let's not forget the devil's work. And then they sit back and think, it's that, like you said, it's apathetic. They go, well, we can't change it. We've always been ruled. We've always been told this has happened. Doesn't matter who you get in, we're always going to get kicked in the bum. So that's the way people think. The only way to do it, I think, is not through social networking, because that's quite a lot of swearing, but is through funding a comedy tour. I'm joking. Where I go on stage and tell the masses our message in the form of physical theatre and dance. It's the only way you get sponsored by the Scottish Arts Council. But yeah, I know, I had to pretend my comedy was storytelling to get a buck. Yeah, you know. But however, I think it's like people talking to each other. I think it is meetings like this. I think it is about folk in work, speaking to other people. But it's not about those people. We all know it's not about those people. It's about the people who live in benefits, who get called the Handout Society by a company the other day on Facebook that told me that they help the poor people, but called them handouts, and also advocated drug testing benefit claimants. I'm like, where did you come from? So it's about the people here. The people here are already interested. It's the people who live in that part of society where they're living in benefits and they've never had a worker in their family for 2 generations. Basically, you're talking about my family. And I think that we have to have a dialogue with the people who are at the most vulnerable part of society, because they don't vote. Because you know why they don't vote? Because they've always been pumped, so they don't care. They've already been pumped with so many governments, they no longer care. And it's those people that we have to target. No us, we're already comedy and politically and interestingly savvy. We're talking about mammies and single mammies and daddies and people who live in the outlying Easterhouse and Castlemilk, and people who don't care about politics, who sit back and go, you know what does it matter? We're going to get shafted anyhow. They're the people that need to be targeted.
Well, thanks very much. Bill was a trade union activist. Can you comment on some of these things?
Yeah, I mean, I think it's just been summed up perfectly. It's not about us in this room. It's not about the politicos. It's not about the people that are interested in the debate. It's the people who aren't part of the debate and the people that have actually been battered for some time now. It's the people who are actually living, is actually surviving. I mean, I just want to put an argument to bed. I think this whole left-wing argument, which it doesn't come from like the proletariat, let's be honest, it mainly comes from this sort of outdated lefty, foosty kind of people who prefer to sit around and talk about things as opposed to do it. But to me, in terms of the balance of capital and the British state and stuff, well, the British state is the centre of finance capital in the world. I think in terms of the internationalist argument, nothing could be more international, more anti-capitalist than breaking the British state at this time and at this time in the world, which I think kind of I'd like to put that to and discuss some real issues about the type of people that we want to talk to. And I think independence absolutely has to be about action, and it's the events like this that show the dynamism and the kind of enthusiasm that is behind our sort of side as opposed to the other sort of side. I mean, it's not to slag off Better Together, but could they really pull off an event like this? I mean, the key thing is though is that we should be pulling off events like this in the Easter houses, in the Drum, up in the north, anywhere where people are and have been disenfranchised from politics for a very long time. And I think the gentleman's point in the front here as well, it's young people as well. I mean, I'm slowly being considered not young or whatever, and not getting ID'd as much as I used to, but I mean, it's disparaging when, I struggle to have a political debate with my own sister, and I think it's about ensuring that the generation behind us and the people that are currently seeking to survive form the basis of who we're appealing to. Because those are the people that we want to see kind of in the seats of power after the election. And I think we talk about new parties and stuff, and yes, we can talk about the formats, but it struck me as an idea from a paper, just to bring ever so slightly academic into it, that actually political parties are not about political careers, they're not about seizing power, although obviously we want the power to redistribute it, but they should be seen as vehicles to devolve power back to communities And ultimately what we're talking about is not just a community council, but we're devolving the power back to people over their own lives, and so that actually one day they can have control of their own lives and they can choose what they do, and they don't have to be dictated by a vicious, nasty Tory right-wing government. They don't have to be dictated by the mainstream political parties as to who they are or what they should be doing with their lives.
Thanks very much. Shona and Mary?
I was going to try and find some way of bringing this back to its title of Too Poor and Too Stupid, but I just can't come up with anything. Anyway, apart from that, firstly, I think you just called my family old and fusty, but I'm still going to be using that later. Yeah, it kind of bringing in a lot of the kind of conversations about, like also what Natalie had said there. It is true, one of the biggest problems we have, it's not, I mean, okay, it's kind of the left, but in general, it's politics, it's talking to each other. And the one thing I would say that radical independents have been fantastic with is actually talking to other people. Although we are knocking on doors and talking to other people, we do need to get out of these rooms a lot more, because it is great. I mean, see, after this, I'm going to be buzzing. I'm going to be like, come on, right, let's go talk to people. And yeah, I'll go out and campaign a few times this week. So these kind of things are important. But at the same time, we do need to talk to people we need to talk to our taxi drivers and our hairdressers and everyone else that we see everywhere. You were saying about like talking to the people who it's affected. One of my favourite meetings is Natalie. I mean, I go to hundreds of these things as well, representing Women for Independence. And one of the ones I really enjoyed was actually a Radical Independence conference, a Radical Independence one that went to Easterhouse, and that was full of normal people. It was actually there was young kids. It wasn't full of the party members. It wasn't full of the political elite or any. It was actually full of local people come in with their trackies, and I really liked that. I mean, it just made a difference, and they were talking, and that does make a difference. But we do need to knock on doors. We do need to talk to our shop assistant.
Can I just say quickly, like what you're saying there about, I agree with you about moms and dads and everyone that aren't really, we say the word apathy or they're not interested. Everything that's been said here is incredibly stimulating, and it's passionate and it's exciting. And I would say that mums and dads and regular people are interested, but they're just not stimulated by what's. I mean, you say they watch the X Factor and everything, and then they are concerned about bedroom tax and everything when it's on the ITV news. Then the X Factor's back on, we're talking about Sharon, how good she is, and we're made to forget, and therefore, like for example, my mum, all she can say about independence is, because I work in London a lot and back up here, and whenever I talk about independence, my mum just goes, well, you need to get a passport to get in England. That's at the height of her sort of, that's all she cares about really. And I think we need to, as a collective, get this kind of passion out there. I mean, we have to actively think intelligently how we're going to do that, because if we don't, then it breeds that kind of apathy. It's an active thing that it's our responsibility to do,
Okay. I'm just going to now ask Mary and Michael for some comments, then take some more, another round of questions. So, Mary?
I want to think about two things that have come, and the first I'm going to deal with is the question of the bedroom tax and how successful that campaign has been and how it's got people involved. Because I've been part of the bedroom tax campaign, and there have been several strands to that. At grassroots level, there have been people from communities who have been planning and organising and getting telephone trees going and being ready to physically prevent evictions. The meetings have been inspirational. The meetings have had people who've never been to a political meeting in their lives, getting up, speaking, being given support to be able to do it. But the most important thing, I think, has been that nobody leaves these meetings without something to do. Talking to people is one thing, and spreading the word and the message, but engaging them in respecting their ability to actually do something themselves, for themselves, and in solidarity with others has been absolutely key. I started a thing called Mrs. Barber's Army, and I started Mrs. Barber's Army because there were so many of the women who felt that the guys knew how to do it all. They were the ones who could get up, Tommy Sheridan, magnificent speech, getting everybody on their feet, everybody's up, stamping their feet, clapping, shouting hooray, and women think, oh God, I couldn't do that. And they're away home. Now, sometimes they were at grassroots level able to get engaged in the prevention of evictions and giving advice to other people, and that was great. But Mrs. Barber's Army organises them for a demonstration. We've got a marching kazoo band, and we've got women who rehearse to play songs on the march. We've got people with football rattles doing things in rhythm to the chants. We've got people with pot lids banging on pot lids. A couple of weeks ago, we organised a social do, because that's important as well, as part of it, getting people together. And we called it a Loaves and Fishes Supper. We borrowed the STUC for a night at the Loaves and Fishes Supper. 123 women turned up, all bringing something to eat. We had a feast and we had a party. We had songs, music, and the whole lot. And they've all got things to do. There's an agenda. And I think that that is the next stage in how we keep getting people involved in this. The other thing I wanted briefly to address is the issue of trade unions working together across the boundaries of the United Kingdom in an independent Scotland, and also I think that touches on organising workers against capitalism. Already the STUC and the TUC, are completely separate organisations. They were founded separately. They work together. They work across the boundaries. They make the policy and they do it. Capitalism is global and it's also transnational. It doesn't recognise national boundaries. Neither should trade unionism and neither should workers.
Thanks very much, Michael.
I don't think I have anything as interesting, as important as what Mary and other people have just said, but hopefully, to perhaps reiterate something we've already touched on, this is just the beginning. And it's just the beginning for the organisations that have been set up in the last 2 years towards this type of democratic and political engagement that we all want to see. And next, I don't think we should be too downhearted about what scale groups like Radical Independence or Women for Independence or National Collective are at the moment, because I truly do believe that next summer is going to be like nothing Scotland has ever seen before. There's a lot of things happening next summer, but I think the momentum towards the referendum is going to be ferocious. It's going to be exciting. It is really going to touch on everyone's day-to-day lives and the stresses and the pressures and the feelings they have. And I think it will be an all-consuming summer and autumn. And it might not be quite the same as, the original Mary Barber's Army in 1917. It might not be the same as, the 15 in the rent strikes and 17 in John Maclean. But when there's the centenary of, the outbreak of World War I, and some people come to this city to parade and celebrate that type of event, I'd like to see Mary Barber's face and John Maclean's face on every wall in this city. I'd like to see people marching on every street, and I'd like to see Glasgow reborn. And maybe that can happen.
It'll really confuse the Orange Walk. They'll be like, why are these songs no angry? Where's his big drum? Can I just say that one of the things I hate, and I don't think Andy's brought this up, is I'm bored with news agencies and people in the media asking me what I'm going to vote. There's a reason why there's a curtain in a polling booth, okay? And I'm sick of people saying, I keep on getting invited onto political things, but only if I stand with my mast. And incidentally, it's a whole different thing. So I'm like, I don't want this all, it's like choose your side all the time, and I'm bored with that. I think that it inhibits us the ability to debate what we want. If we've just to choose our side, and that's irritating. It reminds me of Shettleston when you're either a Catholic or a Protestant. There's no in between. So you have to choose your side, and that's got a nasty feeling to it as well. The other thing is that I just wanted to bring up very quickly is my daughter and I have a podcast that we do, and I'm doing it tonight late. Thank you very much. And and one of the weirdest things is the questions we get globally or people asking us about independence. Ashley and I, it's a comedy podcast, and we debate and chew the fat about all sorts of shenanigans. You can't listen to it. And but it's amazing how, because it's a global podcast, it's amazing the amount of questions we get from Australia and New Zealand and America and Canada that ask us about independence. And it's a horrible thing that the world is more interested in this one subject that we should be interested in. And her and I get stuck because we're like, and we think this, and then every week we change our mind and we debate it, which is healthy. But as I want to go back to talking about, just very briefly, about when I do stand-up, I talk about politics in my stand-up. I know normally a woman just talks about cake, who knew? So we bring up politics, and so does my daughter, she's a stand-up, we bring it up. And it's amazing the amount of working class, working peg, hardcore comedy lovers go up and go, I never knew that. And I'm thinking, oh, there's a vehicle. So my comedy tour, I'm joking. So I think that it's important that we use every type of media, whether it be comedy, whether it be blogging, whether it be podcasting, whether it be Facebook, whether it be, and don't just like stuff on Facebook, do something about it. A thumbs up isn't going to change the world. And it's important that people like that lovely lady there said, engage everybody of all classes and engage them in debate, because I think that's the only way that we're ever going to get people to engage. Isn't just the people who are interested, it's the people who are not interested.
Well, thanks very much for all the responses there. Okay, what I'm going to do now is it's very hot. It's been a long, I think, very good meeting. What I'm going to do is I'm going to take a last round of questions, but I will take as many as I can possibly fit in. So if you do have a question or something that you feel you need to say, then please raise your hand. I have seen yourself, then over there, then yourself. I've got you as well. Okay, just wait till the mic comes over. Just there.
Well, I'm one of those rare breeds of people because I'm currently a no voter. Don't all hate me, but this is my first time. I wanted to know. So I came along because I wanted to be engaged with. And I totally agree with what this lady said. I want to hear about your hearts. I want to hear about your vision. I love the passion. But I also want to have my head engaged. And when you talk about Trident, which I agree with, the removal of Trident, I want to know what happens to the people who are engaged in the supply chain, who are doing the jobs to do with Trident. What are we going to do with them? How much is it going to cost? I want to have my heart with the vision engaged, but I also need to think with my head. And if you want to engage me in politics, I have to see both. I need to see how much the action is going to cost and weigh it carefully, because passion is great, but without cost and counting the cost of doing something or not doing something, you don't get anywhere. You just have lots of passion, which is great, and I love that, and I love being engaged with vision and passion. But what I want to see is how it's going to actually physically work out, what action is going to happen. Because talking about it is great, but without the action on the ground, it doesn't work. So I need both to be engaged.
Okay, thanks very much. Yourself? Again, just wait to the mic.
Okay, I don't think the mic's working. I think we should all just accept the elephant in the room that it's
What the mic's actually doing, is actually recording.
Oh, right, okay.
So that we've got...
Alright, well just keep shouting.
I'll still shout, don't
Still shout, yeah.
So I suppose I agree with that lady there. So I'm an accountant, so it's all about the money to me. In terms of, I'm in a team of 23 people. I'm the only one that will vote yes. The rest of them will vote no because they don't know how it will work financially. And that's the question that's not really been answered. And I completely agree, that's what people keep on thinking. The question I was wanting to actually ask is, how do we engage with voters that vote because that's what their family's always voted for? So I have two friends. One, their dad's always voted for Labour, so we'll constantly vote for Labour. One, you don't know them, it's okay, always votes for Tory, so we'll always vote for Tory. Doesn't really agree with the politics, but we'll always vote for them because that's what their family's done. How do we engage with those people and actually get them interested in what the politics mean rather than just the party name?
Okay, thanks very much. And now over here, just at the front.
My question actually ties in a bit with yourself. I work in Easter House in Shettleston. I work in addictions, and I work with some of the most disenfranchised in mental health, and with some of the most disenfranchised people anywhere that you'll find. But I also find that those people are within the most passionate Poor people drive change. Poor people are the ones that start revolution. Rich people don't start revolutions. The problem is that where I stay is very middle class, and they're just not interested to try and engage them. So my question is, with the bias that's going on in the BBC and STV and in the newspapers and everything, how do we get a message out? I'm finding Facebook and Twitter and all of those sorts of things, there's lots of old people that I can sit and talk to who would like to vote, yes, don't have the information, can't get it, the information they really, really need to understand from the likes of the BBC and STV because of what's been out there and the white noise that comes from them.
Right.
So how do we get it out there? How do we change what the mainstream media are broadcasting throughout Britain? And for the likes of the poisonous stuff that comes from the Daily Mail that's printed in England and not printed up here, and then we don't get to hear much about it. So how do we change that? That's what I want to know.
Thanks very much. If everyone who else wanted to speak, if you just put your hand up again so I can see you.
Can I start quickly to what?
And you can, but in a minute. Because you've not spoke, and I'm going to take you because I think you're the last person that hasn't spoke, then I'll take everyone else. You first. Yeah.
Hi there. This is kind of an extension of the extension, and kind of links in again with this idea of, I'd never asked this to you as individuals, but how can I trust you? Because I'm a firm 6, okay? And if I look at the No campaign, they give me certain statistics and data and reports. And if I look at the Yes campaign, they give me the diametric opposite of those reports. And I'm stuck in the middle as a consumer saying, I don't have time to trawl through this data. How can I trust you guys? What is it that you can do differently? How can I rely on you as kind of political bodies not to shade the important data? Because I never see the No campaign or the Yes campaign ever admitting problems or ever saying that, you know, in an independent Scotland, the accountants might have a real problem. There might be a huge issue with oil. These are the things that we have to do to confront that. Basically what I'm asking is, you know, what is the reality behind all the politics, behind all the banners and everything else? What's the reality?
Okay, thanks very much. I'm going to ask people now, I'm sorry to do this, but I'm going to ask people to be very quick in what they say, right, just so that we can round the meeting off properly. Now, I will take yourself, but first I'm going to take you because you've not spoke, and then I'll have you.
Hi, just a quick question. One of the problems about the 79 referendum, many problems, was an inaccurate electoral register. Is there any work going on just now to make sure that people that should be on the electoral register are?
Thanks very much. And to the person next to you, very quickly.
Well, it was just an extension of an extension of an extension. Was that you know, you're saying I'm with the No voter in terms of all we hear is kind of passion, and the propaganda and the media that we're getting towards the referendum is very patronising, and I think that's what turns people off. Yeah. It's actually we're smarter than that, and mums and dads and the working class are smarter than that, and they want to know, for example, if we go independent. I mean, the idea to me that we start off with Labour and Tory and all the existing parties is obscene. If we're a new nation and we're starting again, we should be starting with new parties. Yeah. And these are the facts, and so when do we create the new parties, and what's the interim when we do all that? They're the things, like the No voter was saying, that we want to know. All these programmes, Road to Referendum, they're patronising and they turn the working class off. I'm finishing there.
Thanks very much. I'm going to take yourself very quickly, and then you.
Yeah, one of the things we heard very little about tonight, apart from the lady down here in the purple, was the media, the bias in the media, and the fact that every morning we can't hear the story, we don't get the story out. Well, the fact is, we don't control the media is controlled only by one side. So you're really only hearing one side of the story. So all we can do is get stuff out on social media and put it out. Now the gentleman over there asked, who can we trust? Well, the only reason I found out who I thought I could trust was by going onto the internet and looking at it and just seeing, okay, how many more people are saying this and how many more people are saying that. As far as oil goes, I'm prepared to go with what the oil companies say. Yeah, there is 2 trillion barrels left in there. We're going to be, there's an awful lot for a long time. Let's make sure we've got a society that uses that for the benefit of our people and for the benefit of the world.
Thanks very much.
All we can do is vote yes.
Thanks very much, and this is the last contribution now, but you can continue the discussion over a drink after. Yourself.
I'm just following on from this point about if we do get rid of all our nuclear weapons and all the associated stuff, the potential job losses, and I think that on our behalf. So much money has been wasted on the military and on nuclear already, that surely we can take some of that money to really look after these people when they lose their jobs, and look at opportunities for retraining and compensation, because we're pissing the money away anyway. We might as well do something useful with it in the decommissioning process.
There are less than
Thanks very much.
1,000 jobs. Listen, there are less than 1,000 jobs directly depending on the nuclear warhead. Many more people are employed at Fastlane because it does a lot of other things that are conventional, but as far as the nuclear warheads are concerned, it's less than 1,000 jobs. Hell, we lost 1,000 jobs in Bathgate for a black pudding factory, and the sky has been falling in.
Okay, thanks very much. I'm going to bring the panelists back in. Can I just say, if I could just have everyone back here. Okay, I'm just going to say, I think we do have to congratulate the organisers of tonight's event, which is the Rick Southside group. They've put a tremendous amount of work in arranging everything that they've got. It will, and it has been recorded and will be put on YouTube as well, so if you do want to relive this inspirational evening, then you can do so, but more importantly, you can pass it on to other people. I just want to say quickly,
just on that note,
yes.
Everyone who's made a comment has asked a question to everybody has been recorded more up close. So if you made a comment that you really don't want to hear in the YouTube video, then speak to me before you leave, okay?
So just before I bring the speakers in, just to round up with their concluding comments, I just want to say just one or two very quick words about the Radical Independence Conference, which is coming up on the 23rd of November in the Marriott Hotel. This will be a conference which will bring together hundreds, I believe up to 1,000 people from right across Scotland. That will involve not just radical independence groups from up and down the country, but for example, the Central Mosque in Edinburgh is sending a minibus. There is a coach coming from Aberdeen. There are people coming from communities right up and down Scotland, and it will be a conference where we are going to put forward a costed, a reliable and a credible point of view about how we will progress with independence. But I'm afraid it won't be, if you're looking for the same sort of thing as you might get from the Treasury just now, it won't be the same as that. We will be putting forward a radical position on what we will do in the independence debate. But also the other thing that we will be doing is we will be having workshops, which will be practical workshops on how we're going to get out and how we're going to go and win more votes and win the referendum overall. So if you have enjoyed the event, we will be selling tickets for that event here at this table. Please do come up and buy them, £4 or £10. And very lastly, just to say, if you do want to get involved, there's a thriving local group here who you can go along, bring your ideas to in terms of events, initiatives, canvassing, all of that sort of thing. So please do get involved with that. Thanks very much for coming, but don't leave just yet, because it's a bit rude to do so before hearing the last comments from our speakers, and I'm going to start with Janie Goodley.
Godly.
Godly, sorry.
I love that you get my first name and my second name wrong in different parts. No, it kind of balanced it up, makes me feel good. Don't worry, when I introduce comedians and I don't know their name, I go, and then just bring them on. It covers up a lot of crap. I'm really happy that people are politically activated and interested in the debate, and I just want everybody who, I mean, like you work in everybody here should be on their knees, because the job you do is unbelievable, and I know exactly what you do, and those people are the most disenfranchised possible, and they're the people who are affected most by policy change. So I just hope that everybody talks about it and gets out there and is interested in the debate. I'm not decided how I'm going to vote. I know that it sounds like I'm going to vote, but I'm pre-hormonal, so it can change. So I'm about to hit my menopause. There could be a murder. So I just want people to keep talking about it. Keep going on social media. Because we don't believe in newspapers anymore. I'm not interested in the Daily Mail, and I'm really just annoyed that the whole day was spent talking about Ed Miliband's dad and how the press attacked him. And you know what I'm bored with? A whole bunch of white middle-class Englishmen get their panties in a bunch. And do you know something? They didn't get upset when they basically said Stephen Gately died because he was gay. So suddenly we've all got to be upset about Ed Miliband. Ed Miliband's dad doesn't care about my dad, so I don't care about him. That's how my politics work.
And Michael from National Collective.
Well, I'd love to respond to all the challenging questions everyone just posed, but time is precious, so... But I'm free to chat afterwards if anyone wants to pull me up on anything I've said or ask anything further. But I'd just say one simple thing to finish, and it's to contrast what's happening here and the questions that are being raised from what's happening elsewhere in Scotland in the No campaign and what's happened today down south with David Cameron. Today, in this discussion, for all its inadequacies, for all its hiccups or mistakes or lack of sourcing, was focused on democracy, was focused on social justice, was focused on how we can make a better world. And I think this is the most important place to be at the moment in the British Isles, and this is the biggest impact we can have on politics for the next generation.
Thanks very much. And Mary Walker.
Well, we came to answer, or tried to answer, 3 questions. Are we too wee? There are 200 independent countries in the world. And of these, nearly half are the same size or smaller than Scotland. We are not too wee. Are we too poor? Well, not according to David Cameron, not according to Alistair Darling, not according to Joanne Lamont, not according to Ruth Davidson, and in fact, not according to any UK politician. We are not too poor. That is not their argument. And the final question was, are we too thick or is it daft? Well, if we don't seize the opportunity to use our imagination to, I'm not going to say grasp a thistle, which you gave me earlier, but to take the plunge and look to the future of an independent Scotland, then yeah, we are too daft.
Thank you. Phil Neal, trade union activist.
Okay, I also wanted to make an eloquent speech like the last 3, but I'll try and answer some questions instead. I mean, I think the first of all is in terms of what would we do with the people that are employed directly or indirectly by Fastlane? Well, I think it's quite simple. We redeploy them. They're very skillful people. Their skills are being used for very horrible means, and I'm sure they'd be happy to design something that actually sort of creates a better world as opposed to destroys the current one that we have. I think we have to look at, that absolutely this has to be about action. I think the RIC conference is a great way to get involved in that. It's a great way to bring people around Scotland together to do that. But more importantly, it's the local groups that are really going to count here. It's local groups in the Southside, it's local groups in the East End, the North, etc., etc. And I'd implore people to get involved. If you know someone who lives in that area, implore them to get involved in their local group. The voter registration drive is an absolute key bit of activity that's quite easy to get people involved in, and people should get involved in. I think especially the 16-year-old vote is a massive way to get people involved in politics again. More importantly, I think we need to challenge ourselves as well. I think one of the problems with the universal credit, this horrible Tory policy that's been brought in, is the fact that it's asking everyone to get on the internet. The majority of claimants don't know how to use the internet, so how are they going to claim the sort of pennies that they actually force themselves that they're forced to live on? I think we then have to say, well, we need to be out in the communities, we need to be out on the doors. Well, we keep saying that, right? But practically, let's get involved in a group, let's go chap on some doors, let's go visit centres where people are genuinely crying out for help and say, look, independence, this is how we can work things and this is what we want to do. We want to empower you to take the lead in our campaigns and stuff. We don't want to be sitting here doing it. We're not here asking for your vote. We're asking for you to pick up a set of pamphlets and go around and put them around the doors. And I think the facts on the ground as well, I think we could do with a little bit more literature on that, absolutely. But we've got oil, we've got whiskey. I think it's how we use these things. And I think key to a lot of what's happened tonight is we've shown that we can use all these things for the betterment of society, and the money and stuff exists. It's how we use it, it's how we grasp it, and I think obviously next year is our opportunity to do it.
Thanks very much. And Sean McAlpine from Women for Independence.
Obviously saved the best to last there. Unfortunately, maybe you stole my line. I was gonna actually say this about the fact that it's true, exactly. Every single person in the No campaign has all said that we can actually afford it. Okay, so they've all said we can afford it. The difference is should we do it? And I think it's about democracy. I think it's about us being able to do it and control ourselves, looking after our own, as well as being able to, well, give something back and let other people see, you know, this is actually something that we could do as well, let other countries see this. I'm going to finish on 2 light little plugs. One relates to a lot of the questions people ask about practicalities. All the answers are out there actually. I mean, the problem is that the mass media don't let anyone see it, they just give the no numbers. But speak to Yes Scotland. Read and look up on things like the Common Wheel. They have a lot of practicalities in there, so that's my first wee plug. And my final plug is actually for Women for Independence. How do we get talking? How do we get people interested? Women for Independence, we have a listening exercise. And what it is we're asking people to get groups of 8-10 women together, sit there, talk about independence, talk about what their issues are, what their questions are, and then feed it back, and then we can start looking at how to answer these questions better. Okay, so, thank you.
Thanks very much, and a big round of applause for all our speakers tonight. You've done a great job.